Sacred geometry is the geometry of consciousness. Everything that exists in the universe, both material and immaterial, is organized and based on sacred geometry. It is a universal language that helps us understand where we come from, where we are, and where we're going. Everything in the universe is geometric. Whether it's humans, trees, animals, planets, or star systems, everything can be measured through geometry. But it's more than just measurement. The act of creation itself is geometric. Let's take a look at the pattern of creation. At its core, everything in the universe emerges from a single pattern, the flower of life, a sacred geometric design considered to be the blueprint of all existence. Even non-physical phenomena such as emotions, thoughts, and the entire spectrum of music originate from this foundational geometry. If you only observe sacred geometry from a distance, you gain only part of the insight. True understanding begins when you draw it yourself. As you draw, you begin to see differently. You start to feel and grasp the essence of sacred geometry. The flower of life is known all over the world. It has been found in Ireland, Turkey, Israel, Greece, Germany, India, Iceland, Tibet, Japan, Sweden, the Yucatan, Lapland, and even ancient Russia, where it was carved into spinning wheels. It appears across cultures, always under the same name, the flower of life. To truly study the flower of life, you must first understand how it is formed. This can be complex, but let's break it down. Imagine pure consciousness, or spirit, floating in a void. There is nothing, no matter, no time, only infinite darkness and a single spirit. Then, the spirit decides to act. It expands its consciousness as far as it can without movement and forms a sphere. This is the first circle of the flower of life. The spirit then becomes aware of itself in all 360 degrees and moves to any point on the edge of the first sphere. There, it repeats the action, creating a second sphere. This forms the vesica piscis, a shape rich with information about proportions, width, and depth. From this form, we derive square roots of 2 and 3, irrational, infinite numbers. Even more fascinating is that within it lies the geometry of light itself, something we'll explore further. From here, the spirit continues. Being perfect, it repeats this act perfectly, drawing the next circle at an equal radius from the previous ones, forming ever more complex patterns of sacred geometry. As consciousness continues to expand, new spheres are created, eventually forming the first complete pattern. This figure has two names, the seed of life or the pattern of creation. Let's turn to the book of Genesis. Each movement of the spirit can be interpreted as a day of creation. The first expansion not only produces mathematical proportions, it also brings forth light. And so Genesis begins. The earth was formless and void, and the Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." That moment is the key. First came movement, then immediately light. Imagine a dark, infinite void. You're floating in that nothingness. You can't fall, there's nowhere to fall. From a purely physical or mathematical perspective, movement is impossible in a void. You can't even rotate. There must be a second point, a reference, for movement to exist. So, before the spirit could move over the waters, it had to create space. This is the pattern of creation. Here, we see what is often referred to as the Holy Trinity. Interestingly, many sacred texts say that by the fourth day of creation, exactly half of everything was made. And when we look at the flower of life, starting from the first circle, we see that exactly half of the circles are completed by that point. Then comes the fifth day, and on the sixth day, a geometric miracle occurs. The final circle forms a 6 petaled flower. This is what scriptures mean when they say, "In the beginning, there were six." This design is known as the pattern of creation, the beginning of the universe as we know it. And these initial movements of the spirit are incredibly important, but it gets even more fascinating. Another powerful shape emerges from this pattern: the tree of life. Those familiar with Kabbalah will recognize this ancient symbol. But the tree of life doesn't belong to any one religion or culture, not even the Egyptians, who engraved it into a temple wall in Luxor over 5,000 years ago. It exists beyond religion. These sacred patterns are deeply connected to nature itself. And surrounding the tree, once again, we see the Vesica Piscis, a recurring and foundational shape. The second important symbol is the egg of life. It's formed after the second major movement of the expanding field. This is a three-dimensional figure, and when you connect its centers, you get a cube. The Egyptians were fascinated by this structure, as it directly relates to the mysteries of life, death, and creation. They referred to this cluster of spheres as the egg of life. It might be hard to believe, but this is a morphogenetic structure that shaped your body, your eye color, the length of your fingers, your proportions, everything. All around the world, the flower of life looks exactly the same. It always stops after the 19th circle, but why? Because someone didn't want you to see what I'm about to show you. This knowledge was once considered so sacred, it was forbidden to share it. Perhaps that made sense at the time. But today, we must use this information to prevent ourselves from sinking into darkness. In biology, it's well known that all living cells have a membrane. The circles surrounding the flower of life represent that membrane. But when we remove this outer layer and continue expanding the circles, something remarkable is revealed. Finish the design, and you'll see a new shape emerge. This is called the fruit of life. It consists of 13 circles, and it is considered one of the most sacred geometric patterns in the world. It's called a fruit because it represents a result, the outcome of divine creation. The fruit of life holds the building blocks from which all reality is formed. As you can see, the pattern is entirely feminine. It contains no straight lines, only flowing, circular motion. But when you begin to connect the centers of these circles using straight masculine lines, something astonishing happens. This act reveals a new structure known as the Metatron's cube. It is one of the most powerful informational systems in the universe, one of the core patterns of creation itself. So what is this cube? Anyone familiar with geometry knows about the 5 Platonic solids, the essential shapes for understanding space and matter. Each Platonic solid has strict characteristics. All faces are the same size, all edges are equal in length, all interior angles are identical, and the entire shape fits perfectly inside a sphere. The cube, for instance, is perhaps the most well-known. All its faces are equal-sized squares, and every angle is exactly 90 degrees. Along with the cube, there are 4 other shapes that follow the same rules: the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the icosahedron, and the dodecahedron. Remarkably, all 5 Platonic solids are found within Metatron's cube. This knowledge also formed the foundation of ancient alchemy. Philosophers like Pythagoras believed that each of these shapes corresponded to one of the 5 elements: tetrahedron, fire cube; earth, octahedron; air, icosahedron; water, dodecahedron; ether. Ether, also known as prana or tachyon energy, is said to exist everywhere, at every point in space and time, in every dimension. A striking example of how this sacred science has been distorted is the modern periodic table. Unfortunately, the version we learn in school is not the original. Dmitri Mendeleev's initial version was very different. In fact, it included a 0 element, the so-called universal ether. In his table, it was labeled as Newtonium. The last known undistorted version of Mendeleev's periodic table was published in 1906 in St. Petersburg in the 8th edition of his textbook Fundamentals of Chemistry. Today, modern science, in both chemistry and biology, is beginning to rediscover these ancient, sacred symbols. And this rediscovery is not only fascinating, it is crucial for our understanding of who we are and how reality truly works. We have 5 geometric shapes, the Platonic solids, that form the building blocks of everything in the universe. But there is something missing. None of them are based on a hexagon. Yet, when we observe the flower of life, we see that its core structure is precisely that, a hexagon. So where else do hexagons appear? We find them in nature, in honeycombs, snowflakes, crystal structures, and even in energy fields. Hexagons are everywhere. And yet, curiously, there are no Platonic solids constructed from hexagons. So what's happening here? Let me introduce you to the vector equilibrium, described by visionary architect and thinker Buckminster Fuller. It consists of 3 overlapping 2-dimensional cubes, built from equilateral triangles and squares. It is the most balanced, symmetrical structure known. Why is it so perfect? Because every connecting line in the shape is equidistant from every other point, including the center. Not even the Platonic solids can claim this. And that makes the vector equilibrium the most stable structure known and the foundation of the 3D flower of life. The only reason it's not classified as a Platonic solid is because it contains both squares and triangles. Platonic solids, by definition, must consist of identical faces. But this invites a deeper question. Could there be other, perfectly balanced forms that serve as the true foundation of the universe? Let's turn to a groundbreaking discovery by physicist Garrett Lisi. While studying coral, he noticed that each coral colony is made up of thousands of polyps, tiny organisms that reproduce constantly. When exposed to heat, he observed that although each polyp is part of a greater whole, every single one experiences reality individually. Quantum mathematics was applied to this observation, and what it revealed was astonishing. The math of quantum mechanics suggests that the universe itself constantly branches into different potential realities. And like the polyps, each of us lives out only one version of possibility. Physics tells us that everything ultimately comes down to the geometry of interaction between fundamental particles. All phenomena in the universe occur only in a state of perfect balance. Garrett Lisi went on to show that even subatomic particles, those that make up protons and neutrons, follow specific geometric rules and arrangements. We've always believed that subatomic particles were the smallest building blocks of matter, but we never really asked, what creates those particles? Garrett Lisi demonstrated something groundbreaking. Particles are made by even more fundamental components. And when we break those down, here's what they look like. At the smallest scale of the universe, everything is incredibly beautiful and precise. Look here. This is one possible pattern showing how these particles may be distributed. As you can see, it follows a hexagonal pattern, the same geometry found in the extended flower of life. Now, if we rotate this shape in 6-dimensional space, another form emerges. Many might recognize it as the Star of David, but its true name is the stellar tetrahedron, a structure that perfectly fits within the fruit of life. All of these particle patterns fit precisely into a 200-dimensional geometric form known to physicists as E8. E8 also has its own visual geometry. When rotated, E8 can generate nearly unlimited combinations of how particles may interact. As we spin this shape through 8 dimensions, we begin to glimpse how reality itself functions. Each rotation revealing new, complex, and meaningful patterns. Here's one such pattern. It strongly resembles Metatron's cube. At the heart of particle physics lies a breathtaking, elegant geometry. And now, perhaps, you're beginning to understand the true role that sacred geometry plays. Where do these forms originate? Earlier, we spoke about the flower of life, that original, perfect symmetry which gave rise to the universe. It is not just the source of mathematical proportions, of light and platonic solids. It is also the origin of every musical system in the universe, both those we know and those still undiscovered. It's the blueprint for energy patterns. It may even be the structure that creates subatomic particles, and potentially goes even deeper than what Lisi's model reveals. Now let's talk about phi, also known as the golden ratio. It's a very simple relationship. If you take a straight line and divide it, only two specific points along the line will create this ratio. The value is approximately 1.618039, and it continues infinitely without repeating. If you multiply a segment by phi, you get the same ratio, just on a larger scale. This can go on forever, both larger and smaller. Phi is infinite. It has no beginning and no end. Some even believe that phi is the root of all other mathematical sequences. Normally, to understand any sequence, you need three numbers, but phi is the only ratio that requires just two. Just like the circle and the square, phi is the source behind all form. But that is a story for another time.